Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living podcast and YouTube broadcast. Thrive Co-Living is a new concept in creative community building. Sustainable, multicultural, multi-generational, and inclusive, Thrive Co-Living communities are built from repurposed big box stores or other suitable buildings. In this series, myself, Jennifer Hooper, and Thrive founder, Mark Stein, will weave together the tapestry that makes up the physical and spiritual components of this new concept in community living. Now on with the show. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Thrive Co-Living podcast. My name is Jennifer Hooper and I am your co-host along with Mark Stein, who is the founder of Thrive Co-Living Communities. Mark, how are you today?
Great. Glad to be here. Really looking forward to this one with Scott.
Yeah, awesome. We are joined today by Scott Rizzo, who is the president and co-owner of River City Aquaponics in Shelbyville, Kentucky. Scott, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you both for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. This is fun and exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Let's start off by finding out a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you or pushed you into this path of aquaponics?
Sure. So I didn't come naturally. So my background, I'm actually a board certified small animal internal medicine specialist. So I'm a veterinarian, but I'm the guy that your vet sends you to when it's bad. And I've helped to build a hospital here in Louisville, and I've been in the Louisville for about 15 years now. And I am a native to the community. I started to get interested in aquaponics probably about 8 years ago. My interest was because the more I learned about how our food was produced and chemicals and a lack of, in my opinion, some government oversight in some of these things, there's just a lot of things that are in your food that we're not happy about. I very much enjoy having control of, if something goes down, I want to try to be independent in some way. So I enjoy growing my own food and creating systems that allow me to be independent in general. And so that's where the interest began, probably 7-8 years ago. I started to explore aquaponics in a hobbyist level. As a veterinarian, I'm a scientist by nature. And so I was drawn to the science very quickly because it incorporates so many different things that I'm already familiar with, from the biology, the fish, the plants. But I also I want to be handyman. I enjoy building things. I'm not always the best at it. I enjoy learning about carpentry and plumbing and electrical. And when you do aquaponics, people don't think about that side of the equation, but it's so much about designing a system and building with your own hands. And it requires a tremendous amount of constant upkeep. And you really can't do well at it if you don't understand how it works. And so I taught myself, I'm self-taught in all the plumbing and electrical and from YouTube online. And so that all appealed to me. I ultimately did end up linking up with a company up in Wisconsin that sells commercial systems and home systems both. And I went up and took a class up there. And as soon as I walked into the greenhouse the very first day, just experiencing the environment, and I said to the people around me, this is a place that I want to be. It's tremendous amounts of oxygen. You have the sun, you have the water. It was just a very pleasant place, a fun place to be in. I enjoyed it, and it's sort of spirit lifting. And I said that day that even though I come to learn about home systems and home aquaponics, that I was going to build a commercial system. And it took me a few years to figure out how to get that done, because I do have a full-time job. And but I linked up with my co-owner, Josh Clark. He's the farm manager, and he was looking for a career change. And Josh is a fish and wildlife biology major, and this kind of fit in his wheelhouse. And so we linked up forces together and invested, and and built the system out there. Louisville doesn't, there's aquaponics in the Louisville community, but on a smaller scale. We have intentions of trying to grow this as big as we can, not just because we want to be a big business, because we don't. This is sustainable, so it's different. Aquaponics uses 1/6 of the amount of water of regular farming. It's much less land intensive. There's no chemicals. You know exactly what's in the food and water. We're going to put solar up, and that's going to be more sustainable. So it's just a better way to farm. And that's what we want to be for the community, at least.
I love
You know,
that.
we really shouldn't go much further without you giving some definitions, because I think
Sure.
a lot of our audience is not familiar with it. So would you sort of put some
Yeah,
meat underneath hydroponics and aquaponics for us?
absolutely. Yeah, no, so it's important. So most people confuse aquaponics with hydroponics. So hydroponics is when you grow plants without soil. And so those systems are typically set up, and they take water that they add all the microelements to, chemicals and things to support those plants. And they basically put everything using machines to titrate those amounts into the water so that the plants can grow optimally. They're often grown indoors with artificial lighting, things like that, but they can be grown in greenhouses too. Aquaculture is growing fish in big pits and growing large amounts of fish. Aquaponics combines the two. So essentially we're taking, instead of using a machine to titrate out all the micronutrients that the plants need to grow, we're using the fish to provide the nutrients naturally. So it's just essentially like, and our tagline for our business is harnessing Mother Nature to grow locally sustainable, healthy food, basically. And that's what we're doing. We're providing the fish, we're feeding the fish are producing, they produce ammonia and some solid waste. We take the solid waste out of the system, but you can use that to grow too. The ammonia is converted by bacteria to nitrites and ultimately to nitrates. And the nitrates are what the plants use to grow. And then there's through other systems within the aquaponic systems, we grow, there's microelements that are added by the bacteria, things, they produce iron and calcium to different extents. We add very few things to it. We add a little bit of calcium at times and a little bit of potassium, and we sometimes have to supplement iron, but those are basic natural things that we have to add to the system. You don't use any antibiotics or fertilizers because the fish don't tolerate that. They can't have those things in there. So everything's done completely natural. You don't have any additives whatsoever, but the water circulates amongst the two. So,
Scott, what kind of fish?
yeah, so you
Goldfish,
can,
or they
yeah, so you typically, you can do aquaponics with a lot of different types of fish, but
no kidding.
and people but it generally it's warm water fish do best. There's a lot of research going on with some cold water fish, but you're essentially growing 3 crops when you're an aquaponic farmer. You're growing plants, that's easy. You're growing fish, and we typically use tilapia, but you're also growing bacteria. And you have to have 3 healthy populations. All of those have to be healthy for your plants to survive. You need the fish are the engine. They make the energy. The bacteria convert that energy from what's not usable to what the plants can use. And then the plants use that to grow. But all 3 things have to be in balance or the system doesn't work. And so for that reason, each of those populations have unique ideal ranges, so pH ranges, temperature ranges. Everything has a perfect balance that it wants to be in. And the best overlapping fish for aquaponics typically is tilapia. And the reason for that is temperature range. The tilapia, it's hard to kill a tilapia fish. They tolerate a lot of range, so if your system gets a little bit out of whack, they're not super sensitive. They're just really hardy fish. But they also love temperature ranges and pH ranges that are ideally suited to grow these other 2 crops, the plants and the bacteria. So that's why we typically use tilapia, but there's other things that can be used. So.
You brought some slides with you to show us what your greenhouse looks like. Do you want to sort of give us a tour?
Yeah, I can do that for sure. Let me flip over here and we'll share the screen, and let's do that. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our greenhouse is about 160 feet long. The first third of the greenhouse is covered. And you can kind of see in the top of the screen here, you have the blue line. That's a blue wall that divides the covered section from the uncovered section. So the uncovered section has plexiglass that allows light in. That's obviously your growing section. And then the first third is where the tanks are. And you can kind of see it in the near field. We'll show more pictures in a minute. But you don't want direct sunlight on your fish tanks because it promotes algae growth. And so you don't want that. That's why that part is covered. It also gives the workers a little place to get out of the sun. But what you see there, in this particular type of aquaponics, there's different ways to grow things. We are using a combination of deep water culture, which is what you see, those two like green football fields are about 18 inches deep and they're full of water. And on top of that water are floating rafts, and you can kind of see the white there. And those rafts have plants that are they're growing in holes in the rafts, and their roots are dipping down into the water. And what we do is we start them off as seeds. So if we kind of go through here, we'll come back in a second. I guess it's probably easier. Let me show you some more around, and then so here's another shot from the back. So you can kind of get an idea. This is the covered section looking to the plant section. You can see all the tanks there. So in this particular system, there's different ways to design it. There are 6 big tanks that form a semicircle around the back. And each of those tanks contains about 250 tilapia. And then the next inner ring are what's called clarifiers. And those 2 of the fish tank feed into one of those clarifiers. So they're grouped 2 into each of those 3 tanks there. And those tanks are used to take out the solid waste, basically. We don't want the solid waste out into the system, but it's actually fantastic fertilizer, and it can be very easily used to grow. And then the water flows from there out into the raft tank. So it actually flows into the right one on the picture there, flows all the way from front to back, and then it crosses over underground and flows from the left tank at the back all the way back to the front. And then it ultimately gets picked up and pumped to the top of the tanks. This whole flow is pushed by one pump. It's all gravity fed. So there's one pump pulls the water from the lowest point and puts it up into these fish tanks, and then it flows by gravity. You'll kind of notice that each of those tanks is a little bit lower, and it flows through the whole thing. And that makes it very energy efficient. There's only one pump in that system.
Oh,
we got windows so that we can observe our fish. We pipe in oxygen. The fish do need oxygen. They're sitting up on stilted tanks there. Those are the tilapia. We have white and sort of the gray tilapia, but they taste the same. Back in the back, if you notice in the very back of the greenhouse, there were these trays. These are called NFT trays. And essentially, we start every plant as a seed, and we put them in seed trays. They're about 2 feet long. There are about 100 seeds in a tray. And we use what are called grow dung cubes, which are fiber mesh kind of natural fiber cubes that the seed is placed in. And that cube moves with the plant as we move it around the greenhouse. And it basically provides a structure for that seed to grow the roots in. So the plants start off in a seed tray, and then once they stay there for 10 days, and then you cut the cubes off into these individual small cubes that you see here in the holes, and we transplant them from the seedling tray to these NFT trays. And the reason we make that move is because you need spacing. So the seed trays, they're right next to each other. They stay 10 days there. Then they get moved to these NFTs. They stay another 10 days. The spacing here is approximately 4 inches apart. The seedling trays, they're right next to each other. And then when they go from there, they go out into the rafts, and the raft holes are about 8 inches apart. And so what you're trying to do is maximize the growing landscape, the real estate that you have in that greenhouse, to get as many plants through as you possibly can. And it's all about spacing. So that it goes from seedling tray to NFT tray, and then ultimately it goes to the rafts. And if you go back to this picture, let's see, when we transplant, those NFTs are in the very back of the greenhouse. And when we transplant from those NFT trays to the rafts, we essentially push the rafts forward. They just float. The whole thing from the back to the front advances forward one row, and we harvest at the closer end and pull them off. And you can kind of see here in this picture, see there's a gap there. The water's there in the raft tank. That's where a raft was. So somebody's harvesting. The harvesters are in the back right of the picture. They've pulled all those rafts out, and and then what we're going to do is slide the entire thing forward from the back, and then we just basically rotate things around. This is a picture looking in the opposite direction. The harvesting area is over to the right. The tank where you can kind of see here. Can you see my arrow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a sump tank here. This is the lowest point in the system. So the water that comes out of this raft tank goes into this, and this is the pump here that pushes it up to the top of these fish tanks. And then again, there's water in here just like there is in here underneath those rafts, and the roots sit underneath them. This is another picture of the top. You can see this is at feeding time. You can see the fish are going crazy in the water. They get fed about 3 times a day. And then another picture. We use grow lights to supplement lighting throughout the year. In the summertime, we obviously don't have to do a lot. In the wintertime in Kentucky, a lot of cloudy days. And so we will supplement light as necessary to try to keep the grow day the same. We can control up in the left-hand corner, there's a big dehumidifier. And I don't know if you can appreciate it, but there are what we call sidewalls and end walls. So this is screen here, and the sidewall is currently rolled up here. See that margin coming around? Mm-hmm. And so as it gets warm in the greenhouse is smart. It recognizes the temperature is getting warm, and it will automatically open the sidewalls and end wall curtains, as well as the top ridge vent, so that you can vent the humidity out and the temperature out and try to keep the temperature as uniform as possible. In the wintertime, because we grow year round, these sidewalls are down, and we have heaters, 2 heaters that keep the greenhouse at an approximate temperature of 70 degrees throughout the year. Now, we don't have air conditioning, so it's hot in the summertime, but in the winter, it never drops below 70 in the greenhouse.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of it. There's a lot more to it, but that's the big picture. So
Scott, when the water gets through the plants and back to the fish, I believe it's totally fresh water, right? The plants take everything out.
They don't take everything. So you actually want to make sure that your nutrient levels are constantly high all the time. Because if they were to take everything out through the cycle, it's too short of a cycle. So the water will move completely through the system within a few hours from beginning to end, all the way around. And so you actually want your nitrates, which is what you use to grow, as well as all your nutrients, iron level, calcium, things like that. You want them to always stay at ideal levels all the time. If they're dropping, plants are going to die. So you have to keep them at optimal levels all the time.
So when it gets back to the fish,
mm-hmm.
what's been removed? What's
So honestly, nothing. So they've taken up more nitrates, but as fast as the plants are absorbing the nitrates, the fish are producing ammonia. The bacteria are converting the ammonia, and it's just a cycle there. The nitrates, which we use to grow, are not toxic to fish. Ammonia is toxic to fish. Nitrites are toxic to fish. But once your system is established, so aquaponics is very much just like getting a fish tank. When you get a regular fish tank, they tell you don't dump in 10 fish into that tank. Okay. There's a concept called cycling that you have to go through. And so if you buy a tank full of water and it's tap water, you put the fish in there. Let's say you just put 1 fish. That fish immediately begins to produce ammonia, and those levels will begin to rise. Now, what's amazing is that regardless of where that fish tank is kept or a large aquaponic system is started, bacteria will come from the air and will colonize that water. And slowly, the first thing that happens is those bacteria will begin to process the ammonia to nitrites. And if you're following your water levels, which you do if you have a fish tank, you'll see a spike. Your ammonia levels go up when that first fish goes in. And then after a couple weeks, the ammonia levels will start to drop. And then you'll get a spike in your nitrite levels because the bacteria came, they process the ammonia, but the byproduct of ammonia processing is nitrites. The nitrites will go up, and then new bacteria will come, a different population will come, colonize the water, and then that will cause the nitrites to drop, and then you'll get nitrates. And nitrates can coexist with fish. So in your regular fish tank at home, if your tank has been cycled, it's got tons of nitrates in it. You could grow a houseplant in there, it'd be fine. And people do. You find those aquariums where they're dripping the plant roots into it. That's what happens. At the beginning of you establishing your fish tank, when those levels get too high, the way you manage it until the bacteria get established is you just do partial water exchanges. You just take water out, not a lot, but a third of it, and that brings the levels back down again. And they keep spiking back up until your bacteria get established. And once there's enough bacteria there to process the ammonia and the nitrites that are coming in, then everything's in balance. And then you can add more fish. And then, does that make sense? And that's how we start. We start these systems from scratch, just like we start an aquarium. Very small numbers of fish. I think we put in 100 fish, which it's not, that's kind of equivalent to one fish in this size. And our ammonia levels went very high at the very beginning in the first 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And the way we managed that was we dumped water at the beginning, and we had, percentage of water was removed. And then once the bacterial populations grew, then we didn't have to do that anymore. And now then it actually becomes, you actually try not to dump water in aquaponics. Aquaponics is, water is your most precious resource. And that's one of the reasons it's very sustainable. You can do this in the desert because you never actually try to get rid of your water, once you get established. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I have a question from a consumer perspective. So I have a very small raised bed in my backyard, and I'm actually eating the lettuce faster than it can grow right now. But where could I go to get this type of produce that I obviously isn't using pesticides or chemicals or things like that, if I was being intentional, not just going to the grocery store? Or can I get it at the grocery store?
Well, in Louisville, we sell in a number of places. So we're in Rainbow Blossom, and we're in Paul's Fruit Market. We're hoping to get in a Kroger at some point. So it's something that is available. I think we're probably actually the only company in town that does sell this product, both out of our farm stand and in retail locations. And so it's hard to get this. It's a growing industry. Hydroponics is also going to not have chemicals in it, but the downside to hydroponics is they dump their water. So they have to load it up with all those things that are not natural. It's not that they're chemicals. They're the things that the plants need to grow, but it's just very mechanical. It's robots, putting it in there. And then they have to periodically dump that water and start over. We keep it all together. We're just harnessing it. Basically, we're taking Mother Nature and we're putting it into a box, and we're basically churning out lettuce at a very high rate. So you can buy our product in town, and there are other places. Yeah,
I wish I could. That's not going to work for me.
I know. Well, the thing that's amazing about this product, which it honestly is the biggest, besides the fact that once people realize there's no chemicals and things, and I think people get that and they look for that, but they don't always necessarily completely appreciate it. What they do appreciate about this particular product specifically is this lettuce will stay in your refrigerator for 2 to 3 weeks, and there's almost no waste on it. So when you buy romaine in the grocery store, it's already looking pretty bad when you first get it home because it took you a week to get there. I promise you, this lettuce will keep. I've had some people say a month. I'm not going to say that consistently, but 2 to 3 weeks easy in your fridge with no waste, no bad parts to it.
That's amazing. They're beautiful plants.
And do you keep the roots on it? I've seen a lot of groups that'll just wrap the roots around it.
No, we actually don't. We harvest, we take the roots off, and for our retail sales, we sell it directly. For the farm stand, we keep it. When you're coming past our place, you're buying it straight off the line, basically. But no, we don't keep the roots on. I don't find that particularly attractive, and it doesn't really add a whole lot to the plant, and I think most consumers don't, when they're in the grocery store, don't want to have to farm right that at that moment. They're not interested in that moment. So we don't do that. It doesn't add much to it. So. Yeah.
Do you have any statistics or predictions about the growth of aquaponics in this country and its availability moving forward?
I
Produce,
hope
I'm
so.
thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the big challenges with aquaponics. So it is more efficient than traditional farming. It is a premium product. So I cannot compete, nor do I try, with the lettuce that's on your grocery store shelf that they're getting from California and other places. That's if
Right.
you want that, I'm not going to be able to touch that. And the other big issue, so we are a premium product, but and when I say premium, typically people are paying around $3.50 to $4 a head. I personally, for lettuce, I mean, most people go to the store, buy lettuce because they need it for that moment. They put it in the fridge. They may not forget to make a salad for a few days, and then they finally pull it out and it's gross. And that's the cycle, and just repeat. And our lettuce will stay, this type of lettuce stays good for so long that you actually can get full usage out of it. And that's a very desirable thing. But as far as so I'm not sure that the price is that much of an issue for people once they understand the product really. But one of the big variables to get into the industry, so this is a capital intense farm. The startup costs are expensive. So you have to buy land if you don't have it. A lot of farmers are adding aquaponics to their existing farm operations because there's no seasonality to this business. We can produce year round. And so from a farmer's perspective, if you're a traditional soil farming operation, you have seasonality, and you're up and down and up and down with what you can produce in your revenue streams. But in this particular industry, there's none of that. But you do have to build a greenhouse to control the environment. You don't have to have a greenhouse to do this at home, but you do have to have it in a commercial application. And then your energy costs are your other big issue. And so what we do, or what we're planning to do, is put in solar so that we can be completely sustainable. That's the big thing. So that's one of our big goals. We're going to hopefully do that this year.
So, the way I found you was just Googling aquaponics, and you showed up near me, and it was incredible that you're 20 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
So happy to do that. So let's encourage audience members, people who are watching this, to just Google it with the name of your town and see if you happen to have it around, since it is growing. If you had the choice between only doing hydroponics or nothing, would you do hydroponics? Given, I've been in some of the do-it-yourselfer shops, and those chemicals or the nutrients are really expensive, even for those small containers. I don't even know that it's sustainable as a business if you had to add all that nutrient.
I don't think hydroponics is particularly small scale farming friendly. I think that it's not that our system is not more complicated. Our system is just more novice friendly. The fish, if you get the right fish, they can tolerate mistakes. If you mess up a calculation with an additive, it also doesn't lend itself to the same, I don't think, personal enjoyment. There's a lot to be said for having your fish and growing them and that interaction, and then seeing what comes out on the backside as far as the plant production versus, filling up the hydroponic titrating machines. It's just, going and picking up a bag of different things. It's different. So I think that aquaponics it's something that you could do on an extremely small scale. This is very intimidating what we have here, but this is a commercial setup. I have a system at my house. It's a smaller version of this, but you can do it with, they call them flood and drain. So people will take those IBC totes, those big commercial totes that have like the metal cages around them. You need to make sure that it's food grade and they didn't have chemicals in them, but you can buy them aftermarket all over the place, and they'll cut off the top third of the tank and flip it over. So they call them so the bottom part of the tank becomes the fish tank, and the top part of the tank becomes the grow bed. And then what you do is you put what's called a siphon drain in it. And so basically you get one pump that will pull the water out of the fish tank and put it up into the top of the IBC tote. And you will put in there, instead of just water, you'll put in clay pellets or different substrates that basically allow the plant's roots to grow into them. And you basically will fill that top third of the tank up. And once the water gets to a certain point, the siphon drain will automatically, without any mechanical stuff, it just because of physics, it'll drain that upper tank back into the fish thing. So you only have one pump that runs, and it can be very small. And that operation right there, it's not necessarily cosmetically attractive, although I've seen people make wood shields around it and stuff and make it very attractive for a home setup, but you can do that. You could be doing aquaponics for probably less than $200, and probably, in any home, and growing on a small scale. And it's extremely effective. The nutrients that come out of this water, I have friends and family that will come and bring jugs to collect some from my system and from the commercial system. We had a peach tree that was at my friend's house, and it was dead, just about completely dead. And they just started putting this water on it, and it was completely revitalized within 2 weeks. Just amazing. And you cannot, awesome. You can't burn them up with nitrogen. Like sometimes you add fertilizers and you burn plants. You cannot do that with this. It's not possible. So you don't have that risk. You provide all the nutrients in a perfect balance every time. And my father would use the water from our system to grow, to put on his annual plants. Every year he plants all these annuals. I don't know why, but he does. And they would last until, August, and they're done. Well, he started using the water from our system, and they went into the end of October. And the only thing that took them out was the temperature. And, they looked fantastic the whole time. And so this water, we're actually likely to begin packaging it and selling it as an additional output for our system, because it is a valuable resource. I mean, we don't need everything that we have. We have excessive amounts of nutrients in the system. We can sell it as well. People could take it home and use it to grow with soil if they want to.
Oh, that's brilliant.
You have a
that's
clever
awesome.
poop name for the...
Yeah, we call it poop juice. Poop juice.
There you go.
Yep. I have to give my father credit for that one. That was his idea. It works. He calls it PJ. His PJ.
Scott, we're thinking about doing aquaponics for our Thrive co-living communities. And the first one we're looking at is to do one in the Tampa Bay area. So talk a little bit about, my thought is that maybe it could be done even without a greenhouse, because it's more about shade. So I'm thinking some sort of screen material over it with maybe layers of shade to go on top of it. And then, so what are your thoughts there? I think you've read or heard a little bit about the Thrive concept, where we're going to have 100 families. And the thought is to create a separate co-op that people could participate in, contribute financially and contribute time, and have fresh vegetables delivered to their door from the hydroponic system. So what are your thoughts about growing in Florida and the differences in the energy needs, and then B, as a complement to our entire community setup?
Yeah, I mean, if you did it outside, so you can do aquaponics indoors or outdoors. If you do it indoors, obviously you're having to provide light. If you do it outdoors, the biggest thing that you will fight if you're not screened is, in fact, insects, because again, you can't add chemicals, nor do you want to your plants. And so you are in a fight with Mother Nature when you go outside. We're in a fight in the greenhouse, even with screens. So you'll have to, it can be done, but anytime you can use the sun as opposed to paying for power, it's a more efficient system. And you've got a long growing season pretty much all throughout the entire year down in Florida, depending on what part you're in. And I think that can be very effective. I was certainly want to shade the tanks, and if you can screen the whole setup, I think that's fantastic. And they don't have, the other thing is that the tanks don't have to necessarily be in the same space as the grow beds. They can be separated. You don't want to separate them huge distances because you have to push the water, but they do not have to be side by side. They can be, The tanks could be in a building, and then the plants could be 10 feet away outside of the building. That's okay. But yeah, I do recommend screening. As far as a co-op is concerned, I think it's ideally suited for that type of a setup, because when you have an aquaponics system, it's effectively a dairy farm. You have to give it attention every single day. And so having people that are willing to give the time on a schedule and come in and, you know, feed the fish. They have to be fed at different intervals. You have to harvest at specific times, because you don't want to be harvesting in the middle of the hot day. The plants do as well. So we harvest in the morning. There's maintenance that has to be done. There's different things that would appeal to different aspects of that potential living community. You know, people that have a bad back, maybe they sit in a chair and they do harvesting. They don't do any lifting. Kids, you know, there's all kinds of aspects that can be divvied up. Now it does require that the people stepping in and out of the system have some knowledge, because you can do damage if you don't know what you're doing. So you would have to have someone there that their full-time job was to essentially make sure that people are doing their task correctly and that you're not hurting things. But it's not rocket science, and it is it's something that I think is very doable, and it would be a great type of farming to add, especially in an intense area. You know, if you've got a small footprint to work with, it's ideal. It's ideal. And the people, I can guarantee you, people that grow this lettuce and grow this fish, that then eat it, will not want to eat anything else. I mean, it's you don't go back once you've done that.
Will you be growing other vegetables or fruits in addition to lettuce, or is that your primary focus for now, or right now, or forever?
Yeah, lettuce is the primary focus. We've done some herbs, and we do grow herbs. So we actually have a full bank. We do collard greens, Swiss chard. You can do tomatoes. We don't currently, but you can. Green peppers, bell peppers, all the herbs that you can grow are available. One of the challenges that you get into, certain varieties of plants are more likely to attract certain types of bugs. So aphids are one of the big challenges that you can run into. And you start to bring in fruiting plants like bell peppers, jalapenos, things like that, which grow very well in the system. You are much more likely to attract aphids, and then you have to deal with those. And again, we don't use chemicals, so that we have to deal with. We use natural predators. We actually, there's beneficial insects companies that specialize in beneficial insects, and so you can buy predator bugs that you basically release in the greenhouse, and they will take out the aphids. But it's expensive. You know, you don't want to have to do that if you don't have to. For us, those types of products, we offer them because the community likes it, the local community, but they don't honestly make us, we don't benefit from them financially significantly. It's kind of a value added thing. So our main thing that we sell, and even the fish are honestly in the system, are a minuscule amount for our revenue. We sell the fillets, but they are not our main money source at all. It's the lettuce. So that's what we focus on.
How much staff do you have to manage a greenhouse this size?
Yeah, it's about 2 to 2.5 people. So probably 2.5 people. It depends too on your mix of how much, if you're doing delivery. So we do a lot of delivery. We do our own delivering right now. The economics are hard when you start to bring in. There's a lot of companies that want to partner with farmers and they take away all the logistics for you, and that's available to us, but they require so much of a compensation number that it's really hard. Your margins as a farmer are razor thin. Every cent makes a difference. So.
You know, one of the things that I've been reading about is the introduction of chickens into that cycle, that the fish love the chicken poop, and if you could even have some of the not nesting beds, but some of the roosts above the fish tanks, and I've seen a couple of photographs of that. And I'm thinking about maybe having more elongated fish tanks that you might be able to have chickens nearby. But that seems like a good complement. And then, of course, with the compost, the chickens can root through that, and you can have worms grow worms in the compost that'll go to the fish and to the chickens. Any experience with that?
Well, I think half that equation might be okay. One of the biggest things with this type of operation is biosecurity. And if you don't want to introduce anything into the system, we wash our hands constantly. You don't want coliforms. You don't want, because the risk of coliforms in aquaponics is very, very low. But I would never want to have chickens above anything. I wouldn't want them in the building.
Anywhere nearby.
Yeah, you want, because if your system gets contaminated, because you can't use chemicals, there's challenges there, and some things can take you out. And if you have to start over, it takes you a minimum of 6 months to become productive again, because you got 6 months of lead time. From the time that we started the system, it took us 6 months for that whole cycling process to happen, for the fish to get big enough to be able to start to grow. And then beyond that, that's just to start growing. It takes about a year for your system to fully mature, to be able to start to produce lettuce of this caliber. And so you won't want anybody adulterating your system with anything. You want everybody that comes in, wash your hands.
No chickens.
Yeah, you want, now any kind of a discharge that we have from the system, like the fish waste that you can take off and things, that could be used to compost and and other things. But I don't want anything in that system. I want everybody washing their hands multiple times. I want to know, that's the other thing. People come in with like outside instruments and equipment, they think it's going to be helpful for that day and working. It's really easy to introduce things into the system. So we clean everything. We use a natural thing called Virkon, which it's approved for organic farming and stuff. But that is how we clean to keep the fish from getting sick and things like that. We clean those types of instruments. And then we use bleach, diluted bleach, just like they use to sanitize in the restaurants and stuff. You have to do that for food processing. So we clean all of our surfaces with that. So, yeah.
Well, I've learned a lot tonight. Yeah. Makes me want to definitely look for more lettuce around here from aquaponics.
Yeah, Google it.
People are interested.
I will be Googling to see where in
nearby.
Maine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great.
I mean, any of your listeners or viewers, the way that I got started was YouTubing, and just because there's a lot of different ways to do this and a lot of different techniques. People are very passionate, but there are some really, really interesting resources online, and people can do this cheap. Now, if you're trying to do a system, in a community setup, it needs to be a little bit more professional, I think. Doesn't mean you can't cut some corners, but you need to do it a little bit right, because you're scaling. Anytime you start to scale, there can be challenges. But if you're trying to do a home system, it is not complicated to do aquaponics and grow your own food and do it well with, and again, I like to build things. I love plumbing. I like all this. And if you're that type of person, or you just want to learn, it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. And again, there's some really great books out there. But YouTubing there's some online classes you can take. I've done all that. And people are passionate. There's also some really good Facebook groups. There's aquaponics for beginners. A lot of bad information on some of those groups. You gotta be careful, but there's communities of people that are doing this and trying to learn.
So you said that it requires a pretty small investment to do a home system, and there is a little bit of time for it to reach its maturity and balance. Once it's up and running, does it require daily maintenance, or will it sort of run itself?
No, you have to feed the fish. So you have to clean.
Feed the fish,
so you have
right?
to,
okay.
Yeah, you got to feed the fish.
Right.
And you have to clean. And it depends on how your system is set up as to what kind of maintenance you have to do, but there has to be some maintenance. Some systems are more maintenance intense than others. It depends on what you choose. A flood and drain system is not particularly high in intensity maintenance. People also, they do put worms in those systems, and those flood and drain with the clay pellets. You got to think about backups. So having redundancies in your infrastructure is important. So a fish can only live about an hour without oxygen being pumped into its tank. So I have at my system here, I have a backup pump. It's already plumbed. All I got to do is unscrew one thing and plug the other one in. So I have a backup water pump and a backup air pump available. And then I also, in my system, both here and at the greenhouse, I have systems in place to monitor if those pumps go down. You can make it as technical as you want. I mean, do you have to have that? No. I mean, if your pump fails, your pump fails, but your fish could die in an hour. So I've got a machine called a sensophone, and it just uses contact sensors. It's real simple. And if my flow switch says my pump is down, it sends me a text message and says, hey, the pump's down, go fix it. And then I got to go fix it. And so it depends on how complicated you want to do it. I enjoy that type of thing. I enjoy creating systems and tinkering. And so I've got all kinds of sensors and stuff on my system, but you're supposed to check at a minimum your pH in your system once a day, these are like little pool kits or little aquarium kits, the APIs, that works. And then periodically you have to test other things, but it's hard. You can't, you want to go on vacation, someone's going to have to take care of your fish.
I think I'm the type of consumer would rather pay the premium price and just buy it from someone who's doing the work. That's me.
Yeah.
It's not much of a tinkerer. So it's good to have that answer, though. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is a commitment. I mean, it's certainly not a hands-off deal. It can be very rewarding, but it's not it's not a set it and forget it thing.
Okay. Thank you.
I think your analogy of having cows or goats is probably a good one. That you really have to stay with them. We really want these communities to be as sustainable as they can and ecologically sound as they can. We're going to use a lot of solar, repurposing rainwater, all those types of things. And for some reason, I was telling a friend about this today, for some reason, this is just a part of our concept, but it resonates with me so much. I think it could be such a huge addition, and for people to have access to fresh food, and I'd like to see us grow some tomatoes and other things, and to have that delivered daily, and to be able to contribute to that effort to grow it. It just feels like a huge part of what we want to do.
Yeah, I think it's important. You have to, there's so much that you can do with it. But it is a very efficient way to farm. It's the most sustainable in my opinion, for sure. And especially if you add additional systems like solar and things, it becomes very efficient. But you can take it as far as you want in that way. It's slowly gaining a foothold in this country. There's a lot of politics that go into traditional farming that keep the aquaponic farmer a little bit at a disadvantage. And that's one of the reasons it hasn't taken off, that and probably the cost of startup. The average guy or girl that wants to go do aquaponics does have to have some financial resources if you're going to do it on a commercial scale. You can't just do this without, and if you have to finance the whole thing, that's hard. I think that's hard. So,
is the U.S. lagging behind other countries in aquaponics?
That's a good question. I think countries, I think I don't know how popular it is in certain parts of the world, but I would expect that if you're in an arid part of the world with water being a precious resource, that this would be perfect, because why would you, we use so much less water than you do with traditional farming, and your soils are terrible in these arid environments. So you don't need soil. It's completely, all you got to do is have the tilapia and water, and you go, that's it. There's nothing to it. And so if you are, in the Middle East and Israel, any of these, in Africa, if you want to bring food to those parts of the world and fresh produce, this is what you do. And then you start to combine this technology with some of the desalination technologies that are out there now. And you really can do something pretty impressive and bring that type of food quality to parts of the world that just don't have access. And communities, you don't have to have a highly educated community to pull this off. You have to have a core people that have an understanding of how to farm, but then the rest of it is just man hours moving it around. And so it's a very, and I think there's a lot of outreach that's happened with churches and different things. People will go to different parts of the world and they'll set up systems like this and teach communities how to run them. But I think it's the future of farming. It's just a matter of getting everyone to agree. It would be nice if the public would accept a higher price point on lettuce. That helps. But people are beginning to understand and become more accepting. So we really don't have, honest to God, we don't have issues. We have more people. The retailers are afraid to put our lettuce in their stores at $4 a head, even though we tell them every time it'll sell. And then when they do it, it sells. And they just don't think the people, but if you put ours lettuce right next to the regular lettuce, it doesn't, nobody
There's
looks
no
at that.
comparison. Yeah.
No. And I'm sorry, people don't care for 50 cents in that moment. They just say, yep, I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and the lack of waste, like you said, it probably balances out.
Yep. For sure. Yeah. As much lettuce as you're throwing out, and ours is still there. So.
Well, Scott, thanks so much. This has been so informative. Like I said, I was so excited to have you on and to meet you and to know that you're so close by.
Sure.
We do have a concept, and we've already had one episode about pet-friendly policies, so we may call you back and invite you to come on and talk about your thoughts about what a group of 100 families, many of whom have pets of different types, and what sort of things we'd need to address. But sure. We may invite you back to talk about that. But so interesting and so exciting, and I want to support you in every way I can and will.
Well, I appreciate the invitation to come. And if anyone in the area, like I said, it's River City Aquaponics. We're just down off I-64 on Mount Eden Road, 2983. We have a Facebook, so River City Aquaponics on Facebook and rivercityaquaponics.com. And we have a farm stand that's open every single day. People can come there, but it's real easy. Jennifer, you want to go buy it at the store. I know they don't have it up in your area, but we've got it at Rainbow Blossom and Paul's here in town. And so lots of people, that's where most people are buying it now. And we really appreciate all the support. It's been great.
Fantastic. And if people want to reach out to you, what is your website?
rivercityaquaponics.com.
Okay. So, awesome.
Yeah. And we'll put that in the show notes and help promote you.
Okay. That sounds fantastic. Really appreciate all the support. Community's been fantastic. I love this. Don't make a lot of money in aquaponics, but it does, I think it sort of reinvigorates the spirit, and it's a good thing. And I've enjoyed the trip that I've been on for the last 7-8 years now. And I've never met a person ever that didn't like what we did. And there's not many industries or careers that you can have that are like that. So that's a benefit. So.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it too.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Thrive Co-Living podcast and YouTube broadcast. To discover more about our mission, activities, and how to find us on social media, please check out our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. There you can also learn how you can support this creative vision in community co-living. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon.